It was a cold morning in London. A fire crackled in the hearth at 221B Baker Street. Sherlock Holmes, the famous detective, sat by the window. He was examining a letter with a magnifying glass. The letter was written on thick parchment. It had strange symbols instead of a normal address. Dr. Watson, Holmes's loyal friend, watched him with interest.
What is it, Holmes?
This, my dear Watson, is a most intriguing puzzle. These are not random markings. They are a cipher, a secret code.
This story is designed to help you learn English. It uses simple words and exciting situations. You can improve your vocabulary and grammar while enjoying the adventure. Follow along as we use clues to solve the mystery, just like Sherlock Holmes.
Look here, Watson. Notice the subtle variations in the ink and how the edges of the parchment are slightly singed. This suggests the sender used a specific type of candle. Every detail is a clue.
London was shrouded in a thick fog that day. The gaslights cast an eerie glow on the wet cobblestones. Holmes and Watson stepped out of 221B Baker Street. They hailed a horse-drawn carriage. Their destination, the British Museum. The carriage rattled through the crowded streets. Street vendors called out their wares. People hurried by, their faces hidden in the swirling mist. It was the perfect setting for a mystery. The fog seemed to hold secrets, whispering tales of intrigue.
This cipher is our guide. It leads to a forgotten artifact, Watson. An object of great power, perhaps even danger.
Watson listened intently. He knew that when Holmes was on a case, nothing else mattered. The British Museum was their only lead. An expert in ancient languages worked there. He was their best hope of deciphering the message. The air in the British Museum was thick with the smell of old books and dust. Holmes and Watson met with Professor Armitage, a small, bespectacled man. He was an expert in ancient languages and symbols. Professor Armitage examined the letter with a puzzled frown.
Most peculiar. These appear to be derived from an ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic system, but with distinct variations.
He spent what felt like hours poring over the letter. Finally, he looked up, a triumphant gleam in his eye.
Eureka, I believe I've unlocked the cipher.
Professor Armitage pointed to a particular sequence of symbols.
This translates to Blackwood House, and this refers to something called the Labyrinth of Shadows.
Blackwood House, a name whispered in hushed tones in certain circles.
Do tell, Mr. Holmes.
Holmes, with a dramatic pause, began to share the whispers he had heard.
Blackwood House was once home to Lord Blackwood, a man rumoured to be dabbling in the dark arts.
Professor Armitage led Holmes and Watson to a restricted section of the museum. They stood before a glass case containing a weathered manuscript. Professor Armitage pointed to a diagram in the manuscript. It showed a maze-like structure built beneath a grand house.
This manuscript describes the layout of Blackwood House and hints at a hidden labyrinth beneath it. This symbol represents a powerful artifact hidden within the labyrinth.
Holmes examined the diagram closely.
A labyrinth, you say? How intriguing. It seems our mysterious letter is leading us on a treasure hunt of sorts.
But Holmes, Blackwood House has been abandoned for years. Surely it's just an old wives' tale?
The game is afoot, Watson. We have our cipher, our map, and now our destination. Let's see what secrets Blackwood House holds.
And with that, they set off into the London fog, their carriage rattling towards the unknown. Blackwood House loomed before them, a Gothic silhouette against the grey sky. The house was dark and imposing, its windows like vacant eyes. The iron gates were rusted shut, and ivy crept up the crumbling walls. The air around the house felt heavy, as if burdened by unseen secrets. They stepped inside the house. Dust covered everything. Cobwebs hung from the high ceilings. The only sound was the creaking of the floorboards beneath their feet.
"This place is dreadful, Holmes," he whispered, his voice echoing in the silence. "Are you sure about this?"
Holmes, unfazed, pulled out his trusty magnifying glass and began to examine the dusty floor. He followed a trail of footprints, barely visible in the thick dust.
"Someone has been here recently, Watson," he observed, his voice sharp with interest. "And they were carrying something heavy."
The footprints led them deeper into the house, towards a grand fireplace in the main hall. Holmes examined the fireplace closely. He noticed a loose brick almost hidden in the shadows. He pressed against the brick, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a dark passageway.
"Just as I suspected," Holmes declared, a triumphant gleam in his eye. "A secret passage! Come, Watson, adventure awaits."
The passage was narrow and damp. The air smelled of mildew and decay. They used a lantern to light their way, the flickering flame casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. As they ventured deeper, the passage opened into a vast underground chamber.
"This must be it, Watson," Holmes murmured, his voice echoing in the cavernous space, the labyrinth of shadows.
In the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal, and on that pedestal rested an object that made Watson gasp. It was a golden mask, intricately crafted and adorned with precious stones. The mask seemed to pulse with an eerie inner light, casting grotesque shadows on the surrounding walls. The labyrinth was a maze of tunnels and chambers. They encountered false doors, dead ends, and even a pit filled with spikes. Holmes, with his keen sense of observation and logic, managed to navigate the traps. He used his magnifying glass to examine the walls for clues. In one chamber, they found a skeleton chained to the wall. The skeleton clutched a tattered journal. Holmes carefully pried the journal free.
"This might shed some light on our mystery," he said, tucking the journal into his coat pocket.
They continued through the labyrinth. Each turn seemed to lead them deeper underground. The air grew colder and thinner.
"How much farther, Holmes?" he asked, his voice strained. "I don't like this place one bit."
Suddenly they heard a sound that made their blood run cold. It was a low chuckle, echoing through the tunnels.
"Someone is following us," Holmes whispered, his eyes scanning the shadows.
They pressed on, their pace quickening, the chilling laughter echoing behind them. They finally reached the heart of the labyrinth, a large chamber illuminated by glowing symbols on the walls. And standing there, admiring the golden mask on the pedestal, was none other than Professor Moriarty, Holmes's arch nemesis.
"Moriarty!"
Holmes exclaimed, his voice a mixture of surprise and anger.
So you're behind all of this?
Moriarty turned, a smug smile on his face.
Indeed, Holmes. This artifact you see holds the key to unlocking a power beyond your wildest imaginings.
Moriarty reached out and carefully lifted the mask from the pedestal. As he held it, the symbols on the walls flared brightly, bathing the chamber in an eerie light.
With this, I shall control not only London but the entire world.
Holmes watched him, his mind racing. He knew he had to act quickly. He had to find a way to stop Moriarty and escape the labyrinth before it was too late. But how? The answer, as it often did with Holmes, lay in the details. Holmes noticed a small, almost imperceptible crack in the chamber ceiling. He pointed it out to Watson.
Watson created distraction.
Watson, ever the loyal friend, didn't hesitate. He grabbed a loose stone and hurled it against the far wall. The sound echoed through the chamber, momentarily distracting Moriarty. In that split second, Holmes leaped onto the pedestal and with a mighty shove, dislodged a large stone from the wall. The stone crashed into the ceiling, widening the crack. Dust and debris rained down as the chamber began to collapse. Holmes grabbed Watson's arm and pulled him towards the opening in the ceiling. They scrambled through the opening just as the chamber behind them imploded. They found themselves in a narrow tunnel. They followed it, gasping for breath, until they emerged into the cool night air. They had escaped, but the artifact and Moriarty were gone. Back at 221B Baker Street, warmed by the fire and a cup of hot tea, Watson turned to Holmes.
What do you make of it all, Holmes? What was Moriarty planning with that mask?
Holmes puffed thoughtfully on his pipe.
The artifact, my dear Watson, is an enigma. Its true purpose remains a mystery. But of one thing I am certain, Moriarty will stop at nothing to possess its power.
He looked out the window, his eyes narrowed in thought.
We may have thwarted him this time, but our paths are destined to cross again, and when they do, we must be ready.
The case of the forgotten artifact remained unsolved, a tantalizing mystery that lingered in their minds. But one thing was certain, the adventure had only served to deepen their friendship and their thirst for solving the world's mysteries. This story, like all good stories, is a journey. It's a journey through the streets of Victorian London, through ancient mysteries, and through the power of language. Just as Sherlock Holmes uses his powers of deduction to solve crimes, you too can use your growing English skills to unlock a world of possibilities. Keep reading, keep learning, and keep exploring. The more you engage with the English language, the more you'll discover its beauty, its complexity, and its ability to transport you to different worlds and times. So keep your curiosity alive, just like Sherlock Holmes, and never stop exploring the fascinating world of English.